A small stone cottage stood surrounded by wet leaves and mud. It stood there as if it had lived many lives before and served many purposes before the one it was carrying out now. It almost had features of consciousness, the way it had placed itself, the same way your elderly relation sits in the corner of a room, not saying anything but oozing experience and memory. Where its stone had suffered decay, it was patched back up with wattle and dough. Around the back of the cottage was some rather elaborate but certainly not badly done extensions made from wooden logs, rope and nails. A cat meows and jumps down from a tree it was perching on, as it soaked in the last of the evening sun. It meowed again as it saw its human walking back to the cottage. Its human was a man on the old side, depending on what age the person was that you asked. The man, whose name was Eskril, caught the sleeve of his woolly layered overalls on the door latch. Toying with the sleeve, he thought to himself, it was caused by repetitive haste. The thought lasted as long as it took him to unhook the sleeve from the latch, and was swept to the back of consciousness with the slamming of the door. One of the many cloth bags owned by Eskril landed on the table with a thud, followed by the much more comforting knock of a tin mug. Eskril spotted the fire in the opposite side of the room, attempting to die in peace, and hurled the sod of turf from the ground by his foot. Upon the sudden disturbance, the fire relit as if it was trying to say, "Me? Gone out? Nonsense." He watched as the embers that were evicted from their homes gently spiraled to the ceiling. Although it was clear to Eskril that was probably dangerous, he always just loved when it happened. Pulled once again from reverie by the immediate task at hand, he put the kettle on the fire, grabbed his bag and sat down, and retrieved a curious book he had found below one of the nearby trees. Distracted once again by a thought of productivity, he tore a page out and started jotting down the wild plants and herbs he had collected and notes on the herbs and plants he had inspected. A flicker of dappled light brought Eskil's attention back to the discovered curious book. He picked it up again and pondered it. Not that Eskril took much notice, but the book looked rather modern, with a hardback cover, thin parchment and equally spaced ruled lines on each page. Eskril didn't pay much heed as he had stopped noticing or taking interest long ago in the world's new advancements and happenings outside the vast forest in which he lived. Pondering the book, his thoughts were brought to the tree whence the thing was found. After all the years lived, and all the different herbs, plants, animals that had fascinated Eskril throughout those years, trees were always the dearest and most fascinating to him. He could, and would, spend full days simply sitting beside a tree, and peace always came and sat with him. A vivid visual description of the tree was in Eskril's head, and he picked up the ink pen and began to draw what would turn out to be a highly detailed and accurate drawing of the tree. By the time the fire had noticed the old man's absorption in the act and was once again trying to peacefully die, Eskril had finished. Closing the book, Eskril tossed another 2 sods of turf, hunted through the many pockets he had, retrieved a pipe, filled it, and contentedly lit it, watching the embers spiraling to the roof. "I'll pop that back under the tree in the morning," he said quietly to himself as he exhaled. A boy with baggy corduroy trousers and a confident walk wanders the floors of a museum. Head in the clouds and the gentle sway of the leather waistcoat worn by the boy make the image all the more fitting. The boy, who was called Creelin, had stopped his thoughtful wandering and was looking through a plexiglass cube on top of a square plinth. Inside the box lay a torn and battered looking piece of paper. Although the paper was browning and barely legible, it stood out from the other plexiglass boxed pieces of paper. The rectangular and much more mundane piece of paper that was tacked to the side of the plinth explained the items in the boxes in multiple languages, and told Creelin, after a minute of finding the English explanation, that the much more interesting piece of paper had notes on different wild herbs and plants from 1433, and some other things, but Creelin's curiosity quenched about halfway through and he continued on his sauntering. 2 days later, Creelin and his brother were conversating in the sitting room. Since his trip to the museum, Creelin had repeatedly found himself deep in thought about a concept already known to him, but realized through different moments and sources. "Life is never happening this way or that," he said in response to his brother. "It is always both. It is all happening at the same time." A good analogy that can be used for a lot of these scenarios is one I heard from Alan Watts. When you breathe, you do it unconsciously, but you can also be aware and consciously breathing. The brother, who could see Creelin was in a world of his own with his conversating, agreed, for he did find it interesting and would ponder it as he cooked dinner, and left Creelin to his devices. Creelin, after hovering in his head for some time, in fact the longest time he had achieved yet of metaphorically standing in the center of a seesaw and evenly distributing weight to each side, or that's what it felt like anyway whenever he stumbled into that state, got up and made tracks for his bedroom. Before the boy with too many thoughts switched the light, he retrieved a small book from the bedside locker locker. Creelan had found a curiously old-looking object in one of the drawers in the house. His grandmother, whom owned the house, had told him with a smile upon seeing the lost memory that she had found the book on the first day she arrived in the house, underneath a tree in the garden, strangely intertwined with some thick roots that broke the ground near the base of the said tree. "Do you want it? Actually, don't answer. If you want it, take it," she had said to Creelan, and that was that. With the first page of the book open, the boy wrote a series of chords and a strum pattern to go with it. It seemed sort of random, but felt like it would sound good, something he never found out for certain. Before closing the book, he realized it wasn't the first page, but the second page. The first one was tightly either glued or stuck in some way to the hardcover. A futile couple of minutes of trying to open that page later, he gave up for fear of ripping it, put the book down, and switched off the light. Strange and simultaneously blurry and vivid dreams took over the boy's subconscious that night. A tree, an old man hurriedly drawing or writing, and tea in a tin mug. The next morning, Creelan found the tree in his grandmother's garden, for it was still standing, and found a little sheltered nook in it to place the book back. A light-filled bedroom with a slumbering body entangled in the bedsheets and duvets sits in the pensiveness similar to the calm of a coffee shop, just after the setup is finished and just before the doors open to the busy caffeine-fueled world. The sun caught in a small crystal hanging from the window frame shines a dappled rainbow over a large mandala tapestry on the wall beside the bed. An alarm rings out for the fourth time, making the slumbering body, a young woman named Lunera, stir blearily, switch it off along with the next three, and look through long sleep-filled eyelashes at the patterned ceiling. She had awoken from one of those strangely vivid dreams that always happen when you fall back asleep in the morning. Lying there, soaking in the sun, she grabbed one of her many sketchbooks from the bookshelf beside the bed, wrote down the dream, then wrote a gratitude list, and finally a short poem. Dreams of memories or memories of dreams. The birds sing to the sun as if to remind me to trust the future blindly. But I am daughter of the moon, which moves things inside of me to unearth the true meaning of memory. Tossing the book and grabbing her phone to connect to the speaker, she got up and walked to the window, where she abruptly stopped in her tracks, staring amazed as Feel Away by Slow Tie played away in the background. Just outside the window, a large oak tree that had once stood towering now lay about 4 meters from the window. "I need coffee and a rollie," she said to herself, choosing to ignore the universe for at least 10 minutes. 15 minutes later, she was at the fallen oak, finishing a crust of brown toast. Lunara climbed up onto a sturdy parrot and sat there with mixed emotions of gratitude for the fact that it hadn't fallen a few meters over, or else it would have been a very different version of forest sounds, her default alarm tone waking her that morning. And she also felt a jittery nostalgia throbbing through her body since she had woken that morning. As she rolled another rollie, realized she had left her pocket dragon inside, and placed the rollie behind her ear, Lunara spotted the corner of something poking out from behind a rotting parrot at the tree trunk. Retrieving a key from her pocket, she precariously moved to the rotting parrot and started scraping and breaking the wood away, to reveal a funnily enough, only slightly rotting and extremely dirty book. "Universe, you are awfully odd," she said aloud. Inside the house, the book lay on tissue opened on the 3rd page, for the previous 2 were oddly stuck to the hardcover, and smoke from the butt of a cigarette in an ashtray made the image look even more aesthetical. Lunara re-entered the room with a pen from upstairs. She had experienced enough utterly random synchronicities before to know what was required of her. Having said that, she could actually do anything she pleased, for this is sort of how those synchronicities work. Nonetheless, Lunara began to write a chorus of a song on the 3rd page, after which she wrote down a description of the melody. "Now here's where things get really interesting," exclaimed a young lecturer to a 3/4 full lecture hall, and, he continued, formed the basis for science's discovery of space-time synchronicity formation, which basically just means events from seemingly different times and also spaces happening symbiotically to create something. If that doesn't make sense, I'll finish the story. After writing the chorus, Lunara asked a handyman friend of hers to remove the tree, who took some of it for firewood, but brought some of the good hardwood to a friend of his who made instruments and happily accepted the offering, turning it into a guitar. Many years later, and only a few years ago, a scientist of the name Opain Link tracked down the guitar and the curious little book. Opain had been researching the theory of space-time synchronicity formation for some time at this point, and this was the proving factor in his theory. Upon retrieving the book, he managed to separate the 3 first pages of the book, as well as accurately date them, and found that using the guitar made from the tree in the first page's picture, playing the chord sequence on the 2nd page, and singing the lyrics in the written melody on the 3rd page all fit together not only perfectly, but pretty damn beautifully too. Curiously enough, although it works well on other guitars, it never sounds quite the same. Even more curious is that the creation was recorded as a snippet and posted to socials with zero promotion or context and garnered exactly 369 billion streams across those socials. But we still don't really know what's going on there. The lecturer knew it was nearing the end of his class time and could see students begin to pack their stuff. Now all that I'm assigning you all until I see you again for practicals on Thursday is to read the first 5 chapters of Opain Lenk's book on STSF and enjoy the rest of the week. The end.